there is this whole idea of fab cities where basically you have as many of your products as possible made locally from waste, especially, and then you have information shared globally.
Hey, Karl, how's it going?
I'm doing great, Erum. Welcome to the Grow Everything podcast, where we talk about biology as technology. And today we're going to kick it off by talking about daylight savings. Do we need it? What's your take, Erum?
I don't know. I mean, I was talking to some of my friends because we were having the Saturday scaries for the Sunday daylight savings time day. So this was fall back. So you're like, okay, well, now it's going to get darker later tomorrow. So we were talking about it, and I thought it was because of farmers. I thought Benjamin Franklin started it to help farmers with, adjust to timing, and so they have productive work days so they can still wake up early. My friend was like, "Oh no, that's not true. That was that's a myth." And I was like, "Wait," and I didn't look into it. But all I know is that it does feel like, first it feels like, wow, you have more time in the day because on Sunday you wake up and you think it's 7:30, but it's actually 6:30, and you're like, okay, look at me.
Yeah, totally.
Look at me. But then I do feel sad, 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 seasonal affective disorder. I kind of do feel that a little bit, especially like the end of the day. I'm like, wait, it's only 4:30. It's dark outside already. So whether we need it or not, I mean, I could adjust. But what about you? Like, any thoughts on daylight saving? Should we have it? Keep it?
I like waking up to the sunlight. So I'd much rather have the light end earlier, I guess. I don't think I could handle that like in the Nordics where, they've only got like 4 or 5 hours of daylight or no nighttime in the summer. I don't think I could do that. But seasonal affective disorder in Rome, you're not supposed to get that until like March.
Oh. Oops. It got dark at 4 o'clock. I'm like, this is horrible.
Yeah, no, it's just an adjustment. But the good news is here we are. It's early November. The days are getting shorter, but only for about 6 or 8 more weeks. Then the days will start lengthening again. So it's all, time is an illusion, but the way that our planet tilts towards the sun changes, and we're soon to be lengthening our day.
That's true. And it is affecting us because we are in New York City. So that's our position on the globe. So everyone has a different experience, but here we are, and we're still busy doing things. I mean, recently I've been, besides working, I was like, all right, I need to do something to enrich my life. And I have a friend who always finds like the coolest things to do in New York City beyond just going out, hanging out with friends, restaurants, and drinks. She's like, hey, I found this Kintsugi class. And I was like,
oh,
what?
Yeah. So what is that? And you took the class?
Yes. So Kintsugi is a Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. So instead of hiding cracks, it celebrates them, turning them into beautiful works of art. So it's rooted in this philosophy of wabi-sabi. And wabi-sabi is finding perfection in imperfection and embracing transience. So really, this metaphor really felt like a lot of things related to my own life, work, even biotech, right? Fixing what's broken, not to erase the past, but to make it more whole, beautiful, and resilient. So I thought that it was a nice culmination of things that are going on, and it brought it all together. The class was great. It was a little long, but it was fun being with my friends and just having conversation while we were working with our hands, working with the pottery. Good times. You should go.
Did you have to bring a broken plate or a cup, or did you break one there?
We broke one there. So they had ceramics, and it was like, all right, we're going to go outside and break this ceramic. And it's like a specific way because you don't want to shatter it, which yeah. I did because I didn't get that last step because they're like, all right, put it 2 feet above ground on a 45-degree angle and just drop it. But I was like, I just slammed it against the ground and shattered into like 60 pieces. Jesus. And the guy was like, okay, you know what? I'll just break it for you.
Another one.
Yeah. No, he's like, I'll just break it for you. You're not understanding. And I was like, I'm like, I wanted more. I wanted pieces, but then like the actual like putting it together would have taken forever because there's like multiple steps to doing it.
I've watched videos of them doing this on YouTube, and it does look like a pretty involved process. You said the class was long. How many hours was it?
It was about 3 hours. It was cool because, they started with a guided meditation and everyone got in the headspace, and it was very zen.
Right. And where was it?
There's only one place it could be. Everyone asked me, like, where is this Kintsugi class? Williamsburg.
Oh, of course.
There's like no other place at Kintsugi class besides Japan.
Yeah, yeah. So, speaking to Japan, I know I've mentioned this before, but I started watching Drops of God. I had watched that on Apple TV before. It's a manga that was turned into a French-Japanese production about a contest between two people who are really into tasting wines. You've seen this and you loved it, but I just thought I'd mention it since you mentioned Japan.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a great show. Just cinematically, the storyline, the actual content, right? So, Drops of God about wine and how precious it is, and like how sommeliers have this ability to sense. I mean, they learn it, of course. They don't have this like superpower that no one else can have, but they learn about their senses and what each scent or flavor comes from, and like have to know climate and terroir and what that all involves. And I just had such a great appreciation just for any product. I mean, wine is one thing, but like even fruits and vegetables, being able to get flavor from the earth. So fascinating. It's like one of those shows where if you want to unwind and be transported, this is the show for you. Apple TV needs to sponsor the Grow Everything podcast because we send a lot of people to their content.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Okay, so let's go from Japan to the solar system. I know we've mentioned it before, but 3i Atlas, I think, just disappeared, right? It's now behind the sun or in the sun's glare.
So much interest around this and a lot of conflicting ideas on what it is. I mean, like, guess there's a broad scientific community that's like, oh, it's a comet. But then there are other people saying, well, it doesn't have all of the makings of a traditional comet. There's so many different things going on with it. There's this professor, Avi Loeb from Harvard, who is a professor of astronomy, and he runs their centers for astrophysics. And he's been identifying all these anomalies. And so far, he's identified 9, and it all revolves around the non-gravitational acceleration. It's almost like, if you want to call 3i Atlas a comet or an interstellar object, almost like it has like an engine or something. And so he identified 9 anomalies, and he was like by December, which I think it'll be closer to Earth.
Yeah, that's right.
If it doesn't eject a certain amount of mass, then something's going on. And he identified the 10th anomaly. And then the crazy thing was, and I don't know if you saw this part, is that back in like 1970s, when people were like listening to the skies, they have this radio device that's listening to what's happening in the universe. And usually it's just background radiation. But then there was this a crazy signal, and they call it the wow signal, because it was like a very specific message, and obviously not English, but it was like a communication. I guess it was printed out in like a basic computer, and they're like, wow. And they actually wrote wow on it, so they called it the wow signal. And it came from the same direction as the 3i Atlas. The theory, I guess you could say, or just the idea, is that maybe the 3i Atlas sent a signal in the 70s, and it's like, all right, we're on our way. And here it is. So who knows? We're all paying attention to it. I just love that it sparked everyone's imagination, and this idea that we're not alone. That's the biggest thing. Yeah. And I'm wearing my UFO sweater, so here we go. And I do have a UFO like painting here. My friend drew this, so I'm all about it. I'm in. Please, first contact. I would love to be around to experience that. But what about you?
I go through phases of looking at what's going on with it. I mean, I think that what we just said, it's like now it's in the sun's glare. I had mentioned that, there have been scientists who say the universe is so big and interstellar objects, there's so many possibilities that we just don't know what they are. And this could just be another form of a comet. But there are so many strange things about it. Plus the fact that we had another interstellar comet come by the sun last year. So it's interesting that all of a sudden we're getting more of these. And I think there's actually another interstellar object right behind 3i Atlas. So I think it's something for us to just pay attention to. I'm with you. It's like, I love paying attention to it, and I love seeing what people are saying about it. I can't wait for us to learn more.
Yeah. I'm just going to be careful of our feeds, because now that I've been looking at it, I've been getting some content that are from like CBS News and other things, but then also just some other people. Then I'm like, all right, what's real, what's not? So I think these are one of those things where it's like, all right, let's be vigilant on what the content is saying, But again, imagination is amazing.
All right, so let's bring it back to biotech and congratulate our friends at Synonym who just raised a good amount of money. They announced a partnership with Brentag to biomanufacture all sorts of things. We did see Edward last week at an event. Edward has been one of the most listened to podcasts. Erum, talk a little bit about this funding.
Yeah, Synonym has been added. They have been creating partnerships with all sorts of companies to be able to biomanufacture specialty chemicals, Brentag being one of those partners. And they created this program called betterwith.bio. So if you are looking to manufacture different specialty chemicals, this might be the opportunity for you. We'll put it in the show notes. But they are moving, they are shaking, and we just love the fact that they're not just waiting around for someone to be like, okay, well, maybe biomanufacturing is a good idea. They're helping transform the industry. And we love hanging out with Edward, the CEO of Synonym, Joshua, who's also part of the team, and everyone that are part of Synonym, who they're also based here in New York City. So it does make it easy to see them.
Definitely. We've talked a lot about biomanufacturing on this podcast, biomanufacturing all sorts of things. And today we're going to talk about biomanufacturing wood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I didn't even know that that was possible. I mean, this is a thing, right? Like biomanufacturing wood. And people are like, isn't that just wood growing from the ground? Yeah, isn't that growing trees? No. Okay, if you are tuning into the Grow Everything podcast for the first time, biomanufacturing is, there's multiple ways of doing it. One way we like to talk about it is the idea of precision fermentation. So just like you brew beer or you make yogurt, or yogurt, you can brew different fibers and products. So you could take, for example, bacterial cellulose, which is kombucha SCOBY. So kombucha, it's like this squishy mass, which is called bacterial cellulose, and you can make it into different products. And we had people on this podcast that have used bacterial cellulose to make leather alternatives. The first person to really do that we love and know is Suzanne Lee, who made it into a leather jacket. So she was the first person to take bacterial cellulose to turn it into a wearable product that we know of. Maybe someone did it in like 1,000 years ago and we don't even know about it. But Suzanne is an incredible person and she has inspired so many people like our guest today, Gabe Tavas.
Before we get into the interview, I just want to give some context as well. Like I got really interested in this idea of growing wood without the trees a few years ago when I read an MIT Tech Review article with Ashley Beckwith, who we've also had on the podcast. So you can go back and listen to Ashley talk about the importance of plant culture and then geopolitics and environmental, taking care of the environment. We've seen lumber prices continue to grow. Lumber is very important for construction and kind of given housing market pressure, tariffs, we've seen the price of lumber go up. And there's supply chain issues associated with that. And then on top of that, we're losing about 10 million hectares of forest that is about the size of Iceland every year because of deforestation. And because we continue to use lumber as a very important part of building in cities, it's important for us to have multiple ways to get lumber, and forest is just one way. And so I'm super excited to have Gabe come on and talk about this. Tell our listeners, Erum, how we met Gabe and what is he doing before we get into the interview.
Yes. So we met Gabe at the bioculture event that was hosted at Indie Bio during Climate Week, and it was hosted by Biofabricate. So Suzanne, who he mentioned, runs that, as well as Juniper VC. And so Gabe was in attendance, and I was just, as we do, just talking to people. And I ran into him, and I was like, "Hey, what brings you here?" And he pulls out this block of wood, but it looks like a really shiny block of wood, to start talking to him about his process, his approach. And so not only is this a very innovative product, but even his business strategy is very smart, his vision for the future. And I'll give you a little bit of background about Gabe. So Gabe is a biodesigner pursuing nature-based solutions to wood, food, river-related sustainability challenges. So that's incredible. And he'll talk more about his invention. It's called Pyrus. And it is the first solid wood from primarily bacterial nanocellulose, to be specific. And he's a CEO and co-founder of his company called Symmetry Wood. So let's let Gabe talk to us and tell us more.
Gabe Tavas, we are so happy to have you on Grow Everything. Welcome on board.
Thank you for having me.
We're so interested in talking to you because you went from being a design student to a biodesigner, and you invented this new material called Pyrus. And that journey is pretty remarkable to us. What was the turning point for you as a design student that made you go, you know what? Biology can actually replace materials, and I think it can replace wood.
Yeah, great question. There have been a couple steps in that journey that really led me down this path. First of all, before I actually started design school, just before starting college, essentially, I actually spent about 7 weeks in rural Ecuador volunteering in an indigenous community for the summer and learned an enormous amount from them, including their connection to nature, to their local surroundings. But in addition to that, I also saw some of the sustainability challenges that they were dealing with, some of the material sustainability challenges that came up. All the plastic trash in their community had nowhere else to go but into kitchen and backyard fire pits. So little kids, as young as like 7 years old, were getting hit in the face with these toxic fumes. I was getting hit with them. And so I had this very visceral experience where I was like, oh my gosh, these materials that designers often use are poisoning the most vulnerable and even the most remote communities on our planet. So that really hit me hard. And so I went into the college experience just with this desire to direct my career towards more sustainable materials, to not use those sorts of substrates. And so I did a lot of independent research outside of class at the University of Illinois. I found out about other projects that were going on, including Suzanne Lee's amazing bacterial cellulose jackets. When I saw that project in particular, I was fascinated with the material. I looked at it more closely, realizing that it's cellulose, very similar to the cellulose in trees. I thought, well, maybe instead of making leather from it, what if we were to, use it to make a new type of wood to basically reflect that similar chemistry? And so that led to me then doing a whole bunch of stuff, including converting part of my local fab lab into a makeshift biomaterials laboratory and working with other students to create the first prototypes of Pyrus. And ever since I've been working on this effort, it's gone from being a college project to a full-blown company now based in Los Angeles.
Wow. That's amazing. I can't wait to dig into that more. And I bet Suzanne will be very happy to hear that. She is a listener of the pod, two-time guest, friend of ours. And actually, Gabe, we met at the Bioculture event, which was hosted by Biofabricate, Suzanne's organization, and Juniper VC. And you got to meet her, which was pretty cool. How was that experience?
Oh, that was a very exciting experience for me. I mean, that was my first time ever meeting Suzanne. So to be able to show her my work was quite gratifying. And for her to be impressed by it too was even more satisfying for me. So that was really a culminating moment, I'd say, for me.
Yeah. To hear that, Suzanne? Just kidding.
Yeah, we love that.
We love that. Yeah. And Suzanne has inspired many people in the world of biodesign. And biodesigners share this mentality that nature already solved the problem. So what did you learn from studying how trees and cellulose form that influenced how you designed your wood product? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways I could, answer this question. Well, first off, one of the things that was really important in my upbringing was that I would spend in Chicago a lot of time volunteering and meditating in forest preserves in the city. So I had been very much literally immersed in trees from a young age. And so I was always looking to them for a number of aspects in my life. When it comes to the technical aspects, I would say, I was very much becoming aware through my research in college of those main molecules of trees. Cellulose can make up about 50% of any given tree. The rest tends to be made of lignin, hemicellulose, and a couple minor extractives. This can vary from species to species, but overall, cellulose was like the primary structure for wood. It's what gives wood essentially a lot of its strength. What's interesting here is we've seen actually in the last few years a lot of people making that realization and further enhancing the cellulose component. There's actually a company that you might have heard of called Unveiled Wood that essentially takes a tree and chemically isolates the cellulose and then compresses it to make it stronger than steel, apparently. What's cool here is with bacterial cellulose, I realized that it's pure cellulose, so it doesn't need to be isolated from the other molecules in the tree. So if you compress that bacterial cellulose carefully and correctly, you can get pretty much a similarly strong material with far less hazardous chemical processing. So that was something that I came to realize over several months of experimentation, and now I can describe it to you all. I basically realized that cellulose by itself can really provide a lot of the strength that you see in trees.
That's so cool. There's so much to unpack there. And I know that there's a lot of interest in the world with engineered timber and building skyscrapers of wood. The biggest one is in Norway. I know there's a couple that are being built in Minnesota, I believe. And where I happen to live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, there's an engineered timber townhouse. I think it's like a 5-story, 10-unit on Union Street, not too far from where I live. But before we get too deep into this conversation, can you help the listeners visualize what Pyrus looks like? What would somebody see or feel or even smell if they were holding a piece of this in their hand?
Increasingly so, I have been describing Pyrus as a material that has the chemistry of wood, the strength of stone, and the adaptability of plastic. So if you picked up a sample, in some ways it would feel a little like marble-like. It's going to be this dark brown, blackish color, and that color is coming mainly from the tea or the tannins that is involved with the kombucha-based bacterial cellulose. When you pick it up, depending on what sample you're holding, you might notice that it has this very smooth, shiny surface. That can happen as a result of high grit sanding. So I believe, Erum, the one sample I might have shown you was like that. It can end up looking incredibly shiny, even without any varnish or oils or coatings on top of it. That is just the material itself. So you can get that kind of mirror finish, but also if you're interested, I mean, there are ways to have a figurine within the material. So we've also had samples that might have like this really cool mix of streaks that are like white, orange to dark brown, all mixing together. And it ends up looking like, well, an art piece in some ways. So there's a lot of possibilities in the future for what this material could look like. But the description I'm giving to you all is a pretty good overall description, I would say.
Yeah. Yep. And you have a piece with you right now, or?
Not right next to me,
Okay.
but certainly we've had many of these prototypes now shown
Yeah.
online, including most recently on CBS, where we were able to show our flooring veneer prototype of the material.
Okay. All right. Well,
Very cool.
we'll link to that in the show notes. But yes, when I saw it, I was like, is this marble? Because it had that really smooth finish and like nice coloring. And I would love to talk more about the color and how that comes about. But there's so much good stuff here. Let's continue though on the world of microbes, right? So you describe working with microbes and bacterial cellulose as a process that blurs design and biology. So what's it like to design with a living system that has its own pace and personality?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, overall, you're definitely talking about a process that you have to be very patient with and be willing to embrace surprises. You're never going to get the same exact look or maybe the exact same properties. There's going to be a natural variation to it. But what's cool here is that we kind of want that. By making a wood alternative, we actually are inherently embracing that variety. So we want these microbes to have a little bit of fun with how they're spinning cellulose fibers together. And then we can have some fun in turn, basically processing those fibers in different ways to match whatever customer specification that we're trying to meet. So it takes patience, but it also comes with enormous amount of possibilities.
That's so cool. When you have the material, are you able to saw it like you would? I'm just curious. Or does it have to be molded in a certain way?
Well, once it's fully, made, you could certainly put it through all the standard woodworking tools. We've also put it through digital fabrication tools, so CNC machines, laser cutters, things that are a little more involved, but those tools allow you to create samples that can be quite intricate. So we've actually in the past laser cut jewelry, for example. We've also used it to make like guitar picks that were very functional. I also in the past was able to use the CNC machine to make some of our early fretboard prototypes, guitar fretboard prototypes. So There's a lot of tools that could work with this, and we certainly haven't finished exploring all the possibilities there.
And one thing is like, okay, so this material is extremely sustainable. You're making it from waste, which I hope you'll talk about. And sustainability often focuses on reducing harm, but you're really talking about redefining what value is. And one of the things we talk about on the podcast is sustainability is kind of table stakes. What people really care about is performance and benefit. And you're using bacteria and waste to create something that's beautiful and that has performance characteristics. But how do you think this mindset shift or could shift manufacturing as a culture?
Yeah, so I for sure think that's where we need to go, turning waste into value. That should be the future of the manufacturing economy. It's actually very integral to this philosophy that I really picked up in my grad school program. Basically, there is this whole idea of fab cities where basically you have as many of your products as possible made locally from waste, especially, and then you have information shared globally. So ways how to make new biomaterials or make new products become a bit more open source. And then that way people can get more easily involved in biomaterials and biofabrication. So that's actually a vision that I want to certainly help promote. I think Symmetry can help redefine the way wood is made. We'd love to see wood coming more from urban areas directly. And we are, in fact, actually exploring partnerships where, for example, urban waste wood, so trees that fell over or got sick naturally, those have been turned into, high-end wood products in the past. We're in conversation with guys who do that to see if maybe in the future, Pyrus, which is wood from food waste, could combine in future products with wood from tree waste. So I certainly see a whole ecosystem here that can open up. And Pyrus will just be one of several options fitting into that vision.
Yeah, it's amazing. Please talk a little bit more about the waste. Where are you getting this waste from? You said food waste. I do know the answer because we talked about this at length. But for our audience, share it because it's a very genius concept.
Right. So if anyone's familiar with bacterial cellulose, folks will recall how essentially you could grow bacterial cellulose from fruit pomace or from beer waste or from even like biodiesel waste. So that's a fermentation that can happen with a wide variety of feedstocks. But what Symmetry is doing in these very early stages is we're actually working with the largest kombucha brewery in the world to take their bacterial cellulose waste as it is and turn it into these early versions of our material. So there's two things happening here. Number one, we're using waste from an actual like major manufacturer. And then secondly, we're working towards that bigger vision of producing the bacterial cellulose from multiple kinds of food waste. So that's the whole picture right there. We see multiple ways to create this material ultimately.
It's incredible because you're talking about the largest kombucha manufacturer, which means scale. So you have the amount of product to really make an impact, which is very exciting. And we talk about growing everything. So growing materials instead of extracting them, which is the wood industry. You extract trees. Karl and I, before you hopped on this call or you hopped on our podcast, we were just talking about how much deforestation is happening. And it's just so sad to see this. And we would love to know from your perspective, what are the biggest technical challenges or philosophical hurdles in scaling an idea from the lab bench to mass production? Like, where are you seeing a bit of challenge and, how do you overcome those?
Well, I would say some of the things that I can mention are true of a lot of startups, but we're seeing, especially now, some challenges with R&D funding. Biomaterial startups really need to get, I would say, like a sizable amount of non-dilutive funding or R&D funding that can help the companies reach a certain point with their technology and their production scale so that they can actually achieve revenue or achieve sales. So we've been navigating that quite a bit in recent times. The second thing, too, is that when you're pioneering a new biomaterial like this, or even like a new process, manufacturing process, there's at times a lack of technical talent that you can rarely access to figure things out. So you're having to go through a lot of experimentation and trial and error that may have been easier to overcome if the necessary human talent was easily accessible. So I've had to do things where I'm learning things that are completely out of my normal design schooling in order to make headway on my work. I'm glad I did that. I've grown enormously as a result, but I can't help but wonder, well, maybe this could have been different. Maybe we could have moved faster. So there's quite a bit of that comes to my mind when I'm answering this question. We need better ways to deploy funding as well as better ways to get the human talent provided to these biomaterial startups. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It is a huge challenge. And then timelines are a big challenge because investor timelines tend to be shorter than the amount of time it takes to actually get things done. So, the wood industry is super interesting. And like, this is one of those things that I feel like Erum and I are both passionate about. I'm very passionate about the forest, about engineered timber, about the use of wood products. And, it's an industry that has centuries of tradition behind it. How do you convince people, especially those who are designers or in construction, that a material, a bio-based material like Pyrus, isn't just an experiment, but it's something that's viable?
Yeah, great question. So I would say the way you convince folks is number one, really look at applications that involve some of the highest value woods. So one of the things that we've been very focused on with Symmetry is using Pyrus to replace endangered tropical hardwoods. Now, those are used for many applications, but the application we are first targeting is related to musical instruments. So we want to use Pyrus as part of guitars, for example. Now, anyone who knows a thing or two about guitar manufacturing knows that there's an incredible amount of detail and craftsmanship that goes into making something like that. If you can get your material to fulfill all of the necessary requirements, that's basically signaling to everyone, like, wow, this is like top notch wood. And it can fulfill basically most other applications, or it certainly has like a path to fulfilling all of the other applications. So we want to keep pursuing that route with the guitar industry in particular. And we see, it's already quite a bit of interest that's starting to bubble up for us. We have a major guitar manufacturer that is looking to co-develop the material with us. And so we'll ride that momentum to get our first customers in that sector. And then we can scale up later on to bigger markets like flooring, for example, which will require higher volume, but less of a quality benchmark. So that'll be a different game that we have to overcome. But we're confident that Symmetry is on track to do that by going after the high value applications first.
This is so incredible because Karl and I interview an investor who wrote a report about some of the failures that have happened in biomanufacturing, more on the chemicals and biofuel side. But there's a lot of lessons that have been learned. It's called a graveyard report. So you might want to listen to that. But honestly, you're checking off all the boxes to do the right things. Strategic partnerships is part of that. And then also finding a niche and this music industry, like going for that, looking at performance, showing that this is a material that works. Yes, it comes from the world of science, but it's something that can scale. And you're doing it in a smart way. You're not going directly for flooring, which you're going to have too much market competition. But this is like, it's genius. How did you land upon musical instruments as your first application area?
Well, the credit for that idea goes entirely to my business partner, Tim Keating, who has spent over 30 years as a rainforest activist campaigning against the use of endangered tropical hardwoods. So he already had a good sense of like all the possibilities as far as like our go-to-market strategy. And he identified this as the best fit given the volume involved and the logic that can ensue if you're successful in that sector. So my partner, Tim, has been, incredibly helpful for Symmetry's go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, great job, Tim.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's amazing. I think there's something poetic about creating a wood substitute that doesn't involve cutting down trees. And before we got on the call, we were talking about this deal that IKEA just did where they're like securing, I think, like 300,000 acres of forest in Estonia, I believe. And I was saying, it would have been so much cooler if they said, we're securing a deal with a company like Symmetry to build facilities that are going to allow us to create a new kind of wood for our furniture. And, we're still at the early stages of what this is going to look like. And we're going to lease this forest land to make sure it doesn't get chopped down. But that wasn't the news. So I'm kind of curious in terms of like, do you see the work that you guys are doing as being part of a bigger ecological story where humans are co-creating with nature versus just exploiting nature?
Absolutely. If I were to actually dive into this a bit more, I'll start off by actually maybe offering some details about the crisis we're seeing in these forests right now. We have about 30% of Earth's tree species now at risk of extinction, in large part due to the logging. And one of the things we don't often acknowledge when it comes to tropical deforestation is we have loggers that are willing to bulldoze like about 30 trees for every high value hardwood tree that they're targeting. So it gets incredibly wasteful and inharmonious with nature. What Symmetry is really focused on is creating materials that do promote harmony between humanity and nature. And so rather than disturbing these forests that should be left intact and continue to be a resource for, I believe, what is like 1.6 billion people that are directly dependent on these ecosystems, we can instead create even better quality material from waste in our cities near where most people live. So we can allow those ecosystems to flourish and allow humanity to flourish at the same time. I'm a really big believer in continuing to support the creativity of a lot of the artists and wood makers out there. And I think this can be a way to allow them to continue to do that, to continue to put quality products out there without feeling guilty about the impact they're having on some of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world.
That's beautiful, Gabe. Well said. It is kind of devastating that we're learning so much about the impact of the economy that we've built based on all of these demands that we have. Obviously we want to live in homes, we want all these things, but we know that there's an impact and there's much change happening. But there is, thanks to you and a lot of the people that we have on this podcast. So you're part of this new generation, bridging design, entrepreneurship, science. My question is, what have you learned about communicating biodesign to investors or partners who might not yet speak biology, but know that something has to change so they don't feel guilty doing business as usual?
Right. So, first off, it's always helpful to have those samples on hand. As you learned for yourself, Erum, I keep one in my pocket all the time, and that always is a way of like starting the conversation. It almost always intrigues people. And once they're intrigued, then you can start to talk about what problem is this solving? What are the possibilities? How has this material been piloted or prototyped so far? And then when I tell some of these people that we've got it on a playable guitar and the guitar sounded great, that can get even some of the more skeptical folks more and more intrigued. They're like, wow, you made it work in a guitar and someone was happy with it? Okay, maybe this isn't like a pie in the sky idea after all. This goes back to what I was talking about with like the high quality products. By proving out our material through these pilots, we're going to be able to convince just more and more people that this is really a possibility. This material can, in fact, work even in the most demanding applications that wood is typically subjected to. So that's how I've been able to get success so far. I'm sure I'll learn more strategies as the company grows further. I'm also open to more tips from other biodesigners, but so far that's been my way of going about educating the larger public that's out there.
Yeah, that's great. And if you could fast forward 10 years, what would your dream ecosystem of biofabricated materials look like? You mentioned this fab city, but how do you see Symmetry Wood, evolving?
Yeah, well, for one, I really am looking forward to when Symmetry can effectively mimic virtually any species of tree. The tropical hardwoods will always remain our top priority, but we'd love to showcase that technical breadth just to show a rainbow, a literal rainbow of possibilities with our material. More broadly, I would also say that I am looking forward to the biomaterials folks really encouraging that urban-based production with the waste as much as possible. I'm someone who very much subscribes to that local approach. And, I could easily see in my dreamscape, essentially like workshops, factories, design studios where people are churning out these biomaterials in the hearts of cities. And then maybe they're surrounded by food forests and walkable communities. That way, what everyone is doing is both healthy and super exciting and innovative at the same time. There's no reason why we can't have models like that in the future.
I love that. It's aligned with a lot of the things that we talk about here on the podcast. I mean, things that Karl and I talk about. There's storylines in sci-fi that have this vision. Not a lot of sci-fi is a little dire, but there's some out there that do paint this picture of distributed manufacturing, localized manufacturing, closed loop manufacturing in your area. And there are other companies that are enabling one part of that, and you're a big part of that too. So to the extent we need to do it, we have all the pieces. We just got to put it together. So we'll come down to LA, right? That's where you're based. But figure out where this fab city can get started. Maybe that would be a good place. We're here in Brooklyn, so maybe we'll do a bi-coastal because we can't. I mean, that's where we live. We got to be where we live. We can't be, shipping things around. But okay.
That's right.
Okay, so we are at the part of this interview where we have our quick fire questions. Okay, here we go. Are you ready, Gabe?
Ready.
Okay. So, wood or mycelium, what would you rather grow with besides bacteria?
This was a tough one. I have to admit, I'll go with mycelium because I like how it feeds off of waste.
Yes, nice answer.
What's the most underrated natural material?
I will say I think cork could use a little more love. It has this natural water resistance and unique feel that I don't see with a lot of other biomaterials oftentimes.
Yeah, wasn't there like a cork fungus or something, like the trees are in danger? Maybe I'm confusing it with something else.
Possibly. I'm not sure about that specific example, but I certainly love how that's one way you could use a tree's resources without killing it.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, amazing. Okay, so one sustainability buzzword you wish could retire.
Oh, offsetting.
Okay.
Offset.
Yeah, the carbon offsetting has not been getting a good detailed reporting lately.
Yeah.
Dream collaborator, a designer, a scientist, or a brand?
I actually would love if somehow Pyrus could be tied to the land art generator. If you're not familiar with this, is a organization that's trying to make renewable energy look more beautiful and be more community oriented. I encourage you all to look up examples of their projects, but I could see our wood being part of the infrastructure for some of those projects in the future.
Wow. And it's called land art?
Land art generator.
Land art generator. Okay, cool. I'm going to look that up. Okay. So finally, if you could replace one everyday product with a biodesigned version, what would it be?
I'd say the earbuds, like disposable earbuds. I want that to be made of biomaterials because they're annoying me on the airplanes right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, she's coming on our podcast.
Yeah. The founder of Gabe. I don't know if you saw that specific product, but they make earbuds out of mycelium.
Oh, wait, I did see a recent Instagram post about that. I was really excited to see that developing. So maybe after the earplugs, they'll move on to the earbuds. That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
she's also LA based.
Oh, even better. I will look to connect with her at some point.
Oh, yeah. We'll make the intro. That's what we do here.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, Gabe, thank you so much for coming on, sharing the amazing work that you've been doing with bacterial cellulose to protect wood and protect our forests. And it's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, this episode is sponsored by Messaging Lab. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling business narratives. And we have done so for the most successful biotech-forward companies across pharma, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice and elevate your business, visit us at messaginglab.com. Let's grow.
That was such a good interview, Erum. What did you think about Gabe and what Gabe is doing?
Gabe, he's creative. He's a visionary. I really, really loved that he brought this back to this idea of fab cities, which you and I had talked about. So when he's mentioned it, I was like, maybe, you and I have hive mind. So do you recall that we had this like telepathic conversation when this was happening? And I was like, oh my gosh, Gabe is a part of our circle talking about decentralized manufacturing, community-based manufacturing. And I was like, this is our boy. This is amazing.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm a big believer that bringing more nature into cities is a good thing, and using nature as a tool is really one of the things that biotech enables. And hearing him using waste as his resource just fits into so much of what we talk about here on the podcast. Plus, as you mentioned in the intro, that inspiration by Suzanne is just amazing.
Yeah, I love that he gave her the shout out. And this whole conversation with Gabe dovetails so beautifully from our last conversation, our last episode with Veronica Breckenridge, where we did a whole conversation about her graveyard report, which talked about failures of other companies and industries to leverage biomanufacturing. And one of the things she mentioned is that when people create some of these biomanufacturing companies, they're going after large markets, commodity markets. But she contrasted it with other companies like that manufacture goods and how they first started in niche industries. And she mentioned Apple and Tesla starting with very high value products. The iPhone was the most expensive phone on the market when it was released. Tesla Roadster was the most expensive, not most expensive car, but it was a very expensive car when it was released, and people were buying it, start bringing revenue, start bringing attention in. And so this is similar to what Gabe talked about on this podcast. He's like, look, we're going to start with making guitars, and we're going to look at tropical woods because that's what people use to make guitars perhaps, but the most important things is tropical woods are one of the most endangered woods. I mean, because of climate, because of logging. So being able to protect them so people don't need to use those woods because they're being generated by Symmetry Wood. And so I love that.
Yeah, it reminded me of a couple things. One is, I've probably mentioned it on the podcast, my parents are Panamanian, and my grandfather in the 30s, 40s, 50s was a young man in Panama, and there was a lot of tropical hardwood to harvest. And even today, they're doing a lot of tropical hardwood harvesting in the Darien Gap, which is that section of Panama between Panama City and Colombia. There's no road between there. It's supposed to be one of the most dangerous areas in the world. But my grandfather would describe like these trees that the wood was so strong that it would break saws. Like they'd be sawing through these trees that were so strong, it couldn't even withstand metal. Like the metal would just break. Somehow they would bring them down. And then he talks about wood that was like just the completely black, like the color of the wood was so dark. And that stuff is being lost. Who knows if any of those trees even exist anymore because they were logged and turned into wood and have been used to build buildings and other things. So hearing Gabe going after that market, I think is really smart because I think there's a lot to do there. And then it also speaks to what I'd said at the beginning of the podcast, listening to Ashley Beckwith talk about this and her own pivot from focusing on wood production to actually plant culture to restore ecosystems and preserve biodiversities, especially when done intentionally. So I think that they fit very nicely, and they also fit really nicely with what Veronica said about going after that niche market to prove that you can scale and then going after mass markets.
Yeah. You mentioned the black wood, and one of the things that we didn't talk about on this episode, and Gabe, if you're listening, we would love for you to talk about it, and we can mention your response in our future episodes, but this idea of color. So when he showed me the Symmetry Wood product, it had this like very dark brown color and like these unique streaks going through it, almost like marble, but we didn't talk about how he gets the color into his product, right? Is it from the bacteria itself, or is it an additive coloring process? And that's really interesting because, you talked about that black wood that was grown in South America that your grandfather talked about. That would be a really cool product to just have, I'm going to say quote unquote, naturally, like just dark wood versus having to paint it, because paint has all sorts of problems, as well, besides being an additional step. And so coloring the Pyrus, I would love to learn a little bit more about that. So Gabe, let us know how that works.
Yeah, and the other thing that we didn't even get into is the kind of the rise of mass timber, which I know we've talked about in the past. Mass timber is this idea of using wood to build skyscrapers and to really prefabricate buildings from wood before you build them on site. And so that means that there's growing demand for wood around the world. And if we're going to build more buildings from wood, which probably are more healthy than stucco and all the stuff we use to build buildings, it means that there's going to be more pressure on forests, more pressure on logging. And so solutions like Gabe's and the things that Ashley are talking about, for this ability to 3D print wood from nanocellulose, I think all those applications are coming, and I think they're fascinating. I'm super excited for them.
Yeah, the products here, the manufacturing's here, they're starting. So they're going to start with their niche industries and then hopefully scale up to be able to replace the need for timber to make houses, or flooring, I think, is the next one before making houses. But it's going to be a very beautiful future. I think the two challenges Gabe mentioned for him, or for Symmetry Wood, is funding and talent. So let's help them out, right? So we know there's a lot of people here looking for careers in bioeconomy or biomanufacturing. And we know investors are listening. So what can we do to help usher in this future sooner, right? So hopefully those that are listening, you can reach out to Gabe, reach out to Symmetry Wood, and see how you can help. This is what this is about, right? This whole podcast is a whole rallying cry for biomanufacturing. So let's grow. Let's grow.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's a great note to end the podcast on.
Awesome. Yes. And please like and subscribe. If you're seeing us on YouTube or on Spotify, hello. Nice to see you. And yeah, please, we're all over the place. Substack. We always love hearing from our listeners, our audience. Let us know what you want to talk about. Recommend guests. We're here for you. So thanks for listening to the pod.
Thank you.